All right. This is the Crypto Show, and welcome to this beautiful climate here. Geez, man, let me just turn the camera around. Here I am at beautiful Lake Chapala at the Roca Azul RV Park. I'm on the road constantly. The Crypto Show got started in 2013, and we were on air as AM, FM, pirate radio, Bloomberg radio. That went on and on for, well, 6 years. And I just got tired of doing that stuff. So now these shows are kind of intermittent. And today I have Duke Leto from the Hush project, and Hush.is is the website for that. So anyway, hello, doggy. So a little bit of house cleaning out of the way. I've got Anarchapulco coming up, which I am the I guess organizer for the crypto part of Anarchapulco, and you can save on your tickets if you want to come to that. It's February 14th through the 18th in Acapulco, Mexico. Use the code Crypto10. All right, now let's just jump right on into it. So I wanted to start off with this. Duke, I know you had a background, I guess, in like Silicon Valley or something. We'll say, like, how did you get started into crypto, and was libertarianism any part of that?
Okay. I started running a Bitcoin full node in 2011, and because a friend told me about it, just kind of, I was very involved in user group meetings for tech stuff like Linux groups and Git user groups and all this kind of stuff. And then smart people were like, hey, there's this cool new thing called Bitcoin. You should check it out. And the first day I heard about it, I read the white paper and started compiling and running the full node. I was like, this is cool. I'm gonna be into this now. So that was 2011, and then I kind of fell out of it. I just life got busy. The next year, I was a CPU miner, GPU miner in the early days. And then when ASICs came out, it kind of ruined the party for all us CPU, GPU miners. And I just lost interest, and I was not involved in Bitcoin at all for many years. I didn't even really see the whole altcoin boom of all these other coins. And then I guess it was 5 or 6 years later in 2017, I someone mentioned that there's all these new coins. There's these things called privacy coins. Those sounded cool to me. And then I jumped back in getting involved. So that was the summer of 2017. I started getting involved with Zcash, Hush, Komodo, which had just launched a few months before that.
Yeah,
So
so in the beginning of these, there was a genesis of these crypto, all these ZK coins that came from Zcash, and so Zcash was the first, but they weren't the first to launch. What is the genesis of these ZK coins?
So just kind of interesting that, obviously Zcash was, relatively public about everything they were doing, open source code, lots of people were arguing, deciding, voting on what actually, what should happen, how it should look, and all these things. And the Komodo project, which it's changed names a lot of times. The KMD Komodo coin, was launched to then, but it came from an older group. There's something called NXT, there's something called Bitcoin Dark, there's something called Supernet, and those were groups
I,
of people that Komodo came from. So Komodo was a new project of those people, and they said, "Oh wow, this Zcash stuff is really cool. We like it." And they took that open source code and they actually mined the very first Genesis block with for Zcash, zero knowledge proof ZK stuff, and they beat Zcash just by a few days. I can't remember exactly, but it was very close. They just iterated a little bit faster. So the first Genesis block for zero knowledge proof privacy coins was KMD, and Zcash a few days later. Then there's something called Z Classic, which was a chain fork of Zcash, which didn't like the 20% founders reward, also known as like a dev tax. So they basically just chain forked and took that away. And then Hush right after that. And this all happened within three or 4 months in the fall of 2016.
Right. I'd seen a question in one of the forums somewhere. It's like, with all of you, all of the different ZK projects out there, and everybody's using Zcash's technology. Why is everybody bashing on Zcash and
I think that's a
picking on
damn
each other?
question. That's a damn good question. All right. I'm going to explain it to the best of my knowledge. First of all, super duper smart mathematicians and scientists, academic people that don't care about privacy coins at all, they're the ones that invented the lowest level internal tech stuff that Zcash used. So first of all, you could even say that Zcash, the company, already outsourced to those academics to create the low level internals that they needed to then make a crypto coin on top of that. And then, that was funded by Silicon Valley venture capitalists. I believe it was $3 million in funding that originally, paid those people to bring the technology from the realm of abstraction, from mathematical academic papers that are just gobbledygook to most people, and make them runnable on a computer, and be able to be relatively fast, faster than they had ever been before. So that's a little bit of the story. And then I would say, then going to the next realm is, there's all these coins that use Zcash technology. I mean, I could list probably at least a dozen or two off the top of my head real quick that use it. Why are they, arguing or fighting so much or whatever? I would say it's a lot. It's very similar to like Linux kernel and the Linux distributions. So, why are there so many Linux distributions? Why is there Gentoo and Slackware and Arch and Artix and gosh, Mint, and I can't even mention. I mean, there's literally hundreds of Linux distributions. They all use the Linux kernel. They all use the same internals, and they all have their own ideas or optimizations for the direction they want to go. So I would say that all these different ZK coins, you could call them, that are based on the math internals that Zcash funded. It's kind of like Linux distributions. They're all using the same super low level stuff, almost like the engine of a car, but then the body is different. Different interior, different seats, different color, different radio. Like all the other things are customized to be different. So, and that's kind of good. In my opinion, that's how research and development should work. You should have a lot of people studying the same questions from different angles, and also have them, maybe wanting to push it in certain different ways. And that's how you get like high quality research and development and find new interesting things that if you just had one group that maybe only had one set of intentions, that they would only push it in a certain way, and maybe only discover certain things, or make it for only one group of people.
Right. Okay, so where did Hush come from, and how did you join, and why did you join?
Well, Hush is older than me. I was not involved in the launch of the project. The original name of Hush was hilariously Z-Dash. People realized that was kind of a weird silly name, and there's actually an online, I don't know what it was. It was like an online contest, and they just randomly asked people on some forum. I think it's not even on the web anymore, but they asked some people, "Hey, we need a new name. Come up with a new name." And some random person was just like, "Hey, what about Hush?" And then they were just like, "Yep, that's it. That's the new name. There we go." And that's a little bit of the origin story there. The original Hush source code was based on the Zcash 1.0 source code. So the source code that Zcash originally launched with. And for instance, Komodo and Z Classic were all based on that. So all the first the first four ZK coins all basically took the Zcash 1.0 code and then tweaked that to their wants and needs. Hush launched, I think it was November 16th, 2017. I think that's the date. And that was, I think, about 2 months after the Zcash and Komodo Genesis blocks were mined. So very, very quickly after those those coins launched, the Hush project was launched. There was like an initial group of developers. There was an initial lead developers. I was not involved with the project at all until about, let's say, 8 months later in the following summer. And those people were already on their way out. Like most of them weren't involved anymore. They kind of had their fun. People leave projects for various reasons. And so I became just kind of a normal, contributor, developer in the second wave of Hush people, tech people coming to work on Hush. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
yeah. And so you worked with Komodo, and you did, I don't know how many commits you did in Komodo, but how did that come about?
So I actually worked on Hush first. So the first day I ever heard of Zcash, I was like, okay, Zcash seems pretty cool. And then 5 minutes later, I was like, oh, there's this other thing called Hush. And they seem even cooler. Like there's no company, there's no like Silicon Valley influence going on. At that time, Hush had 0% dev tax founders reward. 100% of mined blocks went to the miners. And for those reasons, like it just seemed like a cooler project. They also just had like cooler branding. I don't know why. Like just as a tech developer, literally within a few minutes of each other, I learned of Zcash and Hush on the same day. And I was like, I want to be involved with Hush. And I just, joined the chat rooms and then within a few days,
I like the rawness of it too. It's just like kind of hardcore, and we don't give it.
You can tell that it's not. Yeah, I agree. You can tell that Hush is not like a Silicon Valley branded kind of thing from venture capital people. Like back then, Zcash was very much trying to tell people that they were the new Bitcoin, that they were going to dethrone Bitcoin, that Zcash was better than Bitcoin, that Bitcoin had no reason to exist now that Zcash.
When it first launched, it was like 18,000 Bitcoin or some crazy ass number like that for one Zcash. But
I'm glad that you know that history. Yes, I didn't even know that till later, but there was evidently some kind of, before Zcash launched, people were trading thousands of Bitcoin for one Zcash, which is insane. I mean, imagine, like you need like to go down to the 10th decimal place to calculate the percentage loss. But lessons learned.
No, I think that was all. I don't think that was anybody in the market. I think that was like internal manipulation. Like they were just buying their own coins for that amount or something.
Yeah, they were trying to pump, if you can imagine, Silicon Valley venture capitalists were super involved in the launching of Zcash. For instance, they got like a full interview with photos and everything of Zcash team in the New York Times when it launched. Like Zcash had insane connections into the venture capital world that like pushed it on average people. And there was a huge amount of, pumping of Zcash when the tech really wasn't ready when it launched. The initial Zcash tech was painfully unusably slow, and the privacy tech of it. So really, in the first few years of Zcash, it was just Bitcoin with privacy marketing, but the privacy tech of Zcash was barely functional. Pretty much no one could use it. No exchanges supported it. Almost no wallet supported it. You had to use the command line. And then if you did go through all those hoops, it literally would take it could take an hour to like make a transaction. Literally, like Like,
Yeah.
go ahead and wait 1 hour to make this private transaction. No one's gonna do that. Like,
Yeah,
so
I remember all of that for sure.
yeah. So it launched with an insane fanfare and marketing, and New York Times, interviewed, not just like a little blurb. I'm talking about like pictures of the team smiling and all. It's just like, wow, like how much money was spent on the New York, getting them in the New York Times and all that. Obviously, venture capital people, they have an in, they're investors in many things. So they put their Zcash project in, the New York Times. So yeah, I kind of forgot
So
the original question that you asked me. Sorry about that.
yeah, well, that was most of it, but I had also asked about KMD, how you got involved in there, and
Oh,
how
right,
much,
right. Okay.
yeah, how much
So
code you
I
had
got
committed
involved
into
with
KMD.
KMD after Hush and Zcash. So if you can imagine, Zcash was like an upstream of Hush, almost like, for instance, Debian Linux distribution is the upstream for many other Linux distributions. They're kind of they'll like, if they find a bug, they submit it back to where stuff came from. So I got involved with Hush primarily, but I would also send fixes to Zcash because I would find bugs, I would find improvements that could be made, and I would send it back to Zcash. So my initial, involvement was primarily Hush, but also sending stuff to Zcash. And then the second lead developer of Hush was Radix42, and they told me, hey, there's this interesting project, Komodo, KMD. They do interesting stuff too. If you want to, learn stuff or have other stuff to work on, go check them out, see what they're doing. And so then I got involved with KMD a little bit after, just seeing, learning, seeing what they're doing. They had a lot of code that was custom, like they added a lot of stuff to the Zcash code that they forked from. So it was yeah, I got involved with KMD kind of third, after Hush and Zcash, I would say.
And the big topic of this, of course, is going to be the DMCA thing with Pirate. So with Komodo, how many commits did you have in Komodo? And if you made those commits, why aren't those commits able to be sent over to Pirate, since it was a side chain of Komodo?
Let me explain a little bit of stuff, because it's kind of like it's like, nature is always more complicated than our than our brains want it to be. There's no straight lines or perfect circles. So I got, pretty heavily involved with KMD and became a core developer of KMD while I was a core developer of Hush. I basically was working on multiple projects, and that was because they had different stuff to work on. It was interesting, and then all the knowledge that I gained from reading the source code of Hush and Zcash, it all immediately applied to KMD. It was almost like, once you learn the source code of one ZK coin, you can then be really productive in all the other coins, because you're going to find something 95% at least similar, and you can start, you're not just walking into a code base like, oh, I need to read a million lines of code to even start. So I became pretty active there. I think I have, like, I looked it up, it's 187 git commits, which I would estimate a few thousand lines of code. And I also became, just very involved with Komodo. Like, they launched a lot of different coins. So Pirate was like a side project. The core developers of Komodo at that time, we all have our inside jokes and things. And the inside joke was that Pirate was a test coin that gained a marketing department. And what does that mean? Well, with Komodo Tech, one of the biggest innovations that they did above the Zcash code was you can launch your own coin pretty much with one line of code. Like, it's like a Swiss Army knife of a full node. You could give it all these command line options and create a different coin. Like, for instance, a different supply, a different halving interval, a different block reward, and a bajillion other options. So I was working with the lead developer of Komodo at that time, JL777, and I asked him a question that led to the creation of Pirate. So let me explain that a little bit. Komodo was in the process of actually disabling privacy tech on their coin. And the reason for that is that I don't know if people remember, but back then there was it began the big backlash against privacy coins, and they were getting delisted everywhere. So Komodo wanted to keep these listings on all these exchanges, and one of the ways that they did that was they like kind of isolated their privacy tech. They disabled it on KMD mainnet, and then they put it somewhere else on a dedicated coin. That dedicated coin became Pirate. So there was an option to basically say this is only a public transparent chain, i.e. there's no don't allow privacy tech on this chain. And I asked him, I was like, oh, that's interesting. What would it mean if we did the opposite of that? What if we said only privacy tech is allowed on this chain? And he was like, oh, that's interesting. And I went to sleep, and the next day I checked, in the chat, and Pirate was created. Like, he literally overnight was just like, he ran with that idea. And the next day Pirate was created, and it was cool. It was like a whole new step in the direction of privacy. ZK coins became a lot closer to Cryptonote Monero coins, where you have privacy by default. You don't have to opt into the privacy. So Pirate started as a KMD side project, and at first it was kind of just a joke. Like, there was a lot of bad pirate jokes in the beginning, and you got free Pirate for making a bad pirate joke in the channel. They were just giving out free Pirate. And there wasn't like this long concerted, like, oh, people decided on things and voted and for weeks and months decided on how it would start off, which was how KMD Zcash worked. They were like long thought out, decided on whatever. So Pirate was more of like a whim, but it was a good idea. It was a whim, but it was a good idea. So that is a little bit of the origin story of Pirate. So I was involved in the creation of Pirate, and many those 187 commits that were in Komodo, those were used in Pirate, because Pirate used the KMD source code initially. It did not have its own dedicated Git repo. They basically ran out of the KMD repo. So that meant all KMD core devs, such as me, were Pirate core devs. Like, it was the same thing. So I don't know if that explains it a little bit, but
yeah. Well, then, no, why the like, if you're libertarian,
DMCA.
Yeah,
but what
if
is it
you're
even?
libertarian, why would you even go with the DMC claim? And then if you committed those lines of code to KMD, why wouldn't Pirate have the right to them? Or
Okay, there's a little bit of confusion, but I can explain. So first of all, DMCA, what the hell is it? Because some people might not know. It's like, what is it? It's a Digital Millennial Copyright Act. And in general, I'm not a huge fan of DMCA. Let me say that. I am not a huge fan of it. So, then why did I use it? Okay. So here's the thing. I did not use the DMCA. The Hush project did not use the DMCA against any of those original 187 commits that I wrote. Those commits that I wrote were under MIT copyright, which means that's open source. And that means you can do anything you want with it. Open source, MIT copyright, it was invented by corporations because they didn't like free software like the GPL, which actually gives developers more power into deciding who can profit from the code. So the short version is, GPL means you keep control of the code, and companies can't profit from it unless you allow them, unless you say, sure, I will give you the rights to profit from this. And then maybe they're giving you money or some kind of agreement to allow them to profit from it. It gives back to the developers that made the code and maintain it and all that. So the DMCA has nothing to do with that original code. That original code was open source, not free software. It was MIT licensed. I wrote it for KMD. That's that. The DMCA stuff that happened recently was Pirate was taking code from the very latest version of Hush, which is GPL, and then putting it into their repo, into their Git code, which is MIT. And that is what it was about. So it's not about that old code, it's about the new code. And yeah, Hush changed to GPL, I would say about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years. Yeah, about a year and a half ago. So, and that was a response to not wanting people to steal our code and use it, profit from it. And just as an example, like the Linux kernel is GPL. If you're using Linux, then you're using free software to run your computer. And open source is a watered down version of free software, which basically allows companies to take that code and do anything they want, including make it closed source. Like, so open source software is kind of crappy in a way that if you make open source software, a company can then take that code and then make it closed source and proprietary, run a company from it, make millions of dollars, and then steal all your work, profit from it, and not even contribute back and keep it open source. It's kind of crappy. So a long time ago, I decided that all my code was going to be GPL code because I believe in software freedom more than open source, which is really benefiting companies.
That's one of the questions I was going to ask is why did you switch over to GPL3?
Sure. Well, there's, I'm trying to stay diplomatic, but obviously, as you know, there's been a lot of troubled waters in the privacy coin world where projects fight with each other and attack each other and all that stuff. I'm not trying to sling mud and all that stuff, but just very relatively fair and balanced. There was a big falling out between me and the Komodo project because they started to embrace KYC and just being not staying to their privacy roots. So when I left Komodo and the Pirate project, I started to work full time on Hush, and I wanted my code, my newest code in Hush, to be GPL because all the code that I wrote for Komodo, I was thinking that they were gonna stay to their privacy roots, and be against KYC and to really care about privacy. And they really went back on that. A lot of people felt like they got burned by that project promising that privacy was their number one thing and then not delivering on that. So I wanted to basically protect Hush and Hush's code from being taken by other projects and used, abused, made closed source, made proprietary, whatever. So that's kind of the reason. And just to give an example, for many years I have made the default code that I write GPL v3. If I start a new code base, I make it GPL. Now, because it wasn't a new code base, because I was working on an existing code base, it was already MIT. I couldn't just walk into KMD and change their license. You when you're a developer, you walk into a project and you got to deal with the license they already have. So, but with the latest Hush code, I was like, all right, we're gonna change to GPL v3 because that's better for freedom. Free as in freedom, not free as in giving stuff to companies for free to profit from. So, and just as a little side note, a very long time ago in a former life, I worked for an evil company called VMware for a short time. And I saw the internals of how Silicon Valley companies work. And it was part of their company culture to take free software, GPL code, take it, remove the licensing from it, knowing that it's illegal, and then put it in their super crazy expensive proprietary software, and then just, let the lawyers figure it out, because they have so much money to throw at lawyers that the average, free software developer can't fight that. So VMware was sued many different times over this stuff, and I'm not going to go into all that, but that a long time ago, I realized that open source software really just benefits these mega corporations. And it wasn't just an accident. They're not just accidentally using this code. I'm like, oops, we didn't know. Oops, blah, blah, blah. No, they actually asked me to go and remove GPL licenses from all their source code repos as an employee. And they even asked me to not talk about it via email because they were being sued and the emails were being looked at. And I was like, nope, I'm having nothing to do with that shit. So I don't know. I have a long history with caring about licenses, of what they are, what they do, what they're for. A lot of developers just don't care, don't know about what the licenses mean, and they just do whatever. But I don't know. I've been involved with them for a long time, and yeah, that's why I chose GPL. And just
Okay.
as another example,
What?
no,
Yeah.
go ahead. I'm ranting.
What percent of Hush's code is open source, and what part of it is GPL?
0% is open source and 100% is free software, GPL.
Okay, so but it started out as open source, or I mean,
Yes.
where the change on that?
So here's the thing. Here's the interesting detail. Just like a company can go and take open source code and then change the license to make it proprietary or private or whatever, you can go and take open source code and you can change it to be GPL. You can't do the opposite. Once something goes to GPL, you can't go back, because part of the GPL says all changes to this code will keep this license. It's kind of like it's a sticky license. So once code is GPL, you cannot remove that freedom. But if you have open source code or code with no license or code like under the public domain or many other things, you can relicense it. You can just be like, all right, I'm going to release this under a different license now. So originally the Hush source code was open source. And then we changed it to be GPL. And now every single line of every wallet and every code we write is GPL. And here's another reason. I'm not a huge fan of patents. I think that patents probably hurt more than they help the world. But rich companies use patents as a way to do bad things. So if you don't protect your patent rights, you're kind of at a disadvantage. GPL v3 says that the developers of the code retain all patent rights to that code. So all of a sudden it gets rid of these patent troll companies that just file nonsense patent, lawsuits and just, use their expensive lawyers to attack, average developers. So Hush code, we retain all patent rights to all Hush code. The same is not like Bitcoin is open source. They don't have any right to any patents. That if some random company wanted to say, actually, we made the patent on, this Bitcoin thing, like Bitcoin doesn't have the friggin' patent rights to it. Like it's a big mess. So open source it was
Kind of what Craig Wright's
companies.
Kind of what Craig Wright's doing with BSV, right?
Yeah, and I'll repeat. I dislike patents. I don't think they're very good. I don't think that the way that patent law is written in the U.S. is good and helps. But if you are a good if you're like intrinsically good by whatever definition you think, and you keep your patent rights, then that protects you and your project from having bad people use those laws against you. I have no intention of making patents for every line of Hush code. Like we have lots of cool, interesting, unique stuff that no one's ever done. I have no interest in patenting that stuff, but the Hush project retains all our patent rights, and no one else can just come in and say, oh, this is actually our thing. We're going to sue you for this. And since you have no patent rights, this is our patent.
Right.
So, yeah.
offline we were messaging, and you mentioned that Pirate had an out. All they had to do was, what was the whole deal with that? All they had to do is to switch one way.
I honestly think
why
that
not just give them an out? Or
so Pirate did have an out. Pirate could have just changed. Well, they have multiple outs. They could, one thing is they could delete the code that they took from our repo, which use one out, or they could relicense under GPL v3, keep the code, and just add a few lines of, copyright the Hush developers in their source code, because you have to retain those copyright lines of where the code came from. And that's like pretty trivial and easy, and end users wouldn't have even noticed or cared, right? But there is a lot of, bad blood, I would say, between the communities, and they wanted to take the code, say it was theirs, not give any attribution, and kind of, break all this copyright law stuff. And that's why this stuff went down. So I don't know.
they were taken down, and they were taken down and then immediately reloaded. Is that a GPL3, or what is the platform they're on now?
Well, so to give some background to people, the Hush project did a DMCA takedown notice on GitHub against Pirate. What that means is, very often, the most common usage of that is that companies will tell GitHub, hey, we have like private source code. For instance, people will post the internal source code of like Apple and Google and all this stuff to GitHub. And then, companies need a way of telling GitHub, yo, that's not public open source. No one should see that. You got to take that down right now. And there's a whole process for that. We use it in a slightly different way, which was, this is a copyright violation. They're taking GPL code and putting it into MIT code, and that is also covered under the DMCA. So right now, as it stands, the Pirate full node source code is not available on GitHub because it's been taken down. I think that, I don't know all the details, and I don't know what kind of lawyers are going to get involved and stuff, but I did see that Pirate put their source code on GitLab, and they also removed all the DMCA things that were issues. So at some level, they realized that they did something wrong, and they removed all of that code from their version of code that's on GitLab. I don't know whether they'll be able to put the code back on GitHub. That's kind of GitHub's decision. They didn't respond to GitHub contacting them. And I think if they would have, things would have been easier, and they could have maybe solved it without getting taken down. But for whatever reason, they didn't respond to GitHub. And now they're in a stickier situation of having to kind of beg and plead GitHub to change things. I don't know what's going on there, but they also realized they did something wrong, because they deleted all of the code that I had issue with, in their new code repo in GitLab. So I don't know.
Does that affect their privacy or security at all?
I would say it's not. I would say mostly not. I would say there were some advanced features. So one thing that they took from Hush was, Hush has really, really.
You there? Sorry. I'm losing you. I guess the government didn't want me to. Are you there? Okay, I cut out there for a minute, so I'm not sure. Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
So they basically removed that network encryption stuff, but then found a different version of it that's not GPL, and re-added it. So basically, these are like edge cases and things that
Oh man, crap. Yellow. Oh man, losing connection here.
So, can you hear me still?
Yeah, I can hear you now. You cut out at where you were talking about the edge cases.
So just to repeat, it doesn't affect the core privacy of Pirate, I would say, is the TLDR. We could go into detail, but it's more like various features interesting features that they took from Hush, they had to disable.
I mean, I think both projects would have benefited from using each other's community. Um, why
You're right.
didn't you guys just bury the hatchet a long time ago and work this stuff out? Why did it have to go so far? Where was the loss in communication?
That's a good question. I would say when I left Komodo and Pirate Project, I had a bad taste in my mouth because they were going onto KYC exchanges, and they were also doing things like limiting which IP addresses from which countries could use their software, like doing like geo IP fencing or whatever you want to call that stuff. And I got a real bad taste in my mouth that they were going against their privacy roots. And I started working on Hush full time. That's when the communities really split, and there was a lot of anger from both sides of the community, from Hush saying that they were going against their privacy roots, and then from Pirate saying that, this, that, and the other thing, that I'm a horrible person or whatever they said. So it's kind of like the same old story with with open source free software projects that communities fork because they have different opinions about things, and then they're very similar in certain ways, but they're very different in others. So I mean, Pirate has thousands of lines of my code in it, that I it's very, yeah, it's frustrating, but they also
Right.
decided to attack, obviously this is my opinion or whatever, but Pirate and Komodo basically attacked the Hush community in various ways, such as DDoS attacking servers and all kinds of other things that I won't get into. And that was about a year and a half ago. And that is when the communities really split and started being antagonistic towards each other, and, making memes against each other and all this stuff. So, and that was the same time that we, the Hush team changed the copyright to be GPL because we wanted to protect our own code from being stolen by a
Right.
project that was attacking us and stuff. So we went and did our own thing. Um, yeah, it would be better. It would be better for many people if these projects got along, but their marketing and their narrative is that they are the best thing ever and the best thing that will ever exist, and they don't leave a lot of room for collaboration. There's there I'm of the opinion that we need as many privacy coins as we can get. So I'm very much a multi-coin. The future is multi-coin. There's never going to be one blockchain, one project, one coin that satisfies the privacy needs of the whole world. It just can't be, right? We need
Right.
lots of different chains and coins. So Hush is part of that future and part of that vision. And very specifically, Hush has this thing called Hush Smart Chains. And so it comes, the grandparents of Hush Smart Chains come from Komodo asset chains, which they're originally called. And that lets you create crypto coins very easily with one line of code. Well, when Pirate was created, they added a little nasty little if statement that if you wanted to create your own privacy coin, let's say you thought Pirate was a really good idea, and you're like, cool, I want to create my own coin like Pirate, they put a little if statement, and then it says, if you try to do that, we'll just error out and exit and say, you know what, you should just use Pirate instead. We don't want any competitors. So
that's how I found Hush. Is I was looking at doing that with Komodo.
yeah.
Excuse me, and because I have a little meme kind of privacy coin project that's fixing to launch, and that's why I ended up going to Hush, is because I wanted that Z to Z protection from Komodo, but it wasn't offered.
Yes. So Hush,
I like the people at Komodo and everything. I talked to like Jason Brown over there for a long time about it, and he's a great guy. I like Jason a lot. But
I worked with him a lot. Yeah, I worked with him a lot. I worked with Jason Brown a bunch when I was part of Komodo, and yeah, he's a very level-headed person. I think he did a lot of their business development for a long time. I'm not sure what parts he's involved with now, but yeah. So Hush believes in freedom, and we actually believe it so much that we give people the keys to create a competitor to Hush with one line of code. We even have a little website that lets you create it, and you just do a little web GUI, and you can just make your own privacy coin that directly competes with Hush. If you want to do that, fucking go do it. Like, awesome. We believe in freedom and a multi-coin future where as many privacy coins as possible are needed. That was a big falling out time. Me and the lead dev of KMD really didn't see eye to eye on that very specific change. And if you can think about it, it's not like a super technical thing like, oh, we're creating this new math or this new crazy code and it's thousands of lines of complex code. This is literally one line, an if statement, like if X, then Y, that prevents people from doing what they should be able to do. They had to add code to remove people's freedom. That really rubbed me the wrong way. So in Hush, we got rid of that stupid line. Like, that's dumb. Why would we have that? Like, so part of Pirate's marketing and brand to be the only privacy coin ever, and they are the best. They are the only one that should exist, and screw you if you want to make your own, or even just, maybe you want to make like a sister coin. I like to think in families of coins. So maybe you're not trying to replace Hush or Pirate. Maybe you're trying to make like a sister coin that is dedicated to a certain, a small thing, and you want to like integrate with them. Like, you can't even do that. So what Hush smart chains allow you to do is, first of all, if you want to go ahead and compete with Hush with our own code, there you go. We did all the work for you. There you go. If you want to go do it. Then, I make a joke, but no one knows. Maybe the NSA is running a Hush smart chain, in a Faraday cage under a mountain somewhere that's not on the internet, that you have to, know certain passwords and whatnots, and they're like totally isolated from the internet, and they're using it internally. Like, that is a use case for Hush smart chain. They can do that. And then everything in between, you could integrate with Hush, partially, maybe talk to our chains or not, or you can try to compete directly and whatever. We give you all the options. We let people decide. That's the freedom of, actually.
Through I've been talking with you for a while, and you talked about adding a lot of Cryptonote stuff into Hush. What do you think is better, ZK or Cryptonote, and why?
All right, let me just give a little bit of detail on that. So Cryptonote is kind of the the family of coins like Monero and Zeno and all these other coins. They're not based on zero knowledge math. They're based on, I don't want to go into math jargon and whatnot, but they're based on math where you're obfuscating the real data. Like, you're not proving it with zero knowledge. And to me, as a mathematician, zero knowledge math is just like, it's like magic. It's math that becomes magical because it allows you to do something that's like seemingly not possible, which is to prove something without giving up any data about that thing. So Cryptonote coins are older. I think they should be given a lot of respect. Monero has been doing their thing, and Monero wasn't the first Cryptonote coin. There's a lot of others before them they have become the largest by user base and market cap. But that whole family of coins should be given a lot of respect because they were doing it first. They, in my opinion, they're kind of the first real family of privacy coins. There were some privacy features of non-privacy coins, I would say, before that, but Cryptonote coins were where it really became like privacy coins, and they have a lot of things that could be learned from, and all that. And a lot of the privacy coin world just fights, like the Zcash world and the Monero world is famous for fighting with each other and making memes against each other and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, Zcash is privacy optional, and over 90% of Zcash is stored in non-privacy addresses. And the whole history of Zcash is basically the same as Bitcoin. There's very, very, very little real privacy in Zcash mainnet. That's the real hilarious joke, is that Zcash spent all these millions of dollars of venture capital money to create this amazing new tech and math and all this stuff, but then they didn't use it. They didn't make it required. They didn't force it, everyone to use it and benefit from it. So that's why all these other little projects like Komodo and Hush and Pirate and other ZK coins, are very interesting, because we're the ones that actually are pushing the envelope and making it required. Pirate was the first to make it Z to Z only. And then I saw what they were doing. I was like, yep, that's the next step. We got to, we got to do that. That is the future. And then Hush did that and then made various other steps in addition to that. And then, there's other coins now that do the same thing. So
the Z to Z is shielded from one end to the other end.
Z to Z means that you don't allow transparent transactions at all. You can never send to a transparent, and by transparent, I mean like a Bitcoin address. And what it really means is that there's no public data on an explorer that shows an address or an amount. That's really what it boils down to. So Z-adders never appear on a blockchain, and the amounts in Z-adder transactions never appear in the explorer, the public data. So yeah,
except for from the Coinbase, right? The very first transaction from the Coinbase has to be transparent, or am I wrong on that?
Yes, no, you're on the ball. I usually don't mention that at first because it's just like kind of confusing to some people. A lot of people aren't miners, but Coinbase transactions are when you mine a new coin. It's not the company. They stole that word because it's cool. But basically, you would actually reduce privacy if you allowed mining to a Z address, because then that Z address would become public on the blockchain explorer. So it's a little non-intuitive at first, but it's actually better to just allow miners to mine to a transparent address. First of all, those addresses are crazy fast. Like Z addresses will never be as fast as regular T-adders. So for mining, like every millisecond counts, because if you're 1 millisecond late in submitting your block that you mined, someone else gets it, So right. Milliseconds really matter to them, and all they have to do is just change their address. But the default behavior of Bitcoin, if you're a solo miner, is that every new block goes to a new address, and then once you're on a Z-adder chain, you then have to send it to a Z-adder. It's kind of like a one-time single-use address that's never used again, which that's awesome. You can't get better privacy than that. It's basically
I was asking the question the other day, and that there's a Telegram group called Pursuit of Privacy, and it's really cool because I see a lot of the devs in there. So you're really getting fucking solid information from the
very interesting channel
who know what's up. And I had asked the question, like, if you wrap a Zcoin, Zcash or whatever, whether it's Hush or Pirate or whatever, what are you giving up by wrapping that? Is it only exposed during the time that it's wrapped and then it disappears, or are you like opening up data to any coin that it came in contact with? How does that work?
Yeah, you're leaking a lot of metadata. So when you create a wrapped privacy coin, you're creating a bridge from a I like to call them surveillance coins. Satoshi did amazing things. I have a lot of respect for them, but Bitcoin is a surveillance coin, right? There's no privacy there. You have to stand on your head, go crazy to get a little bit of privacy, and you have to pay for extra
It's not
privacy.
meant to be. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be a
It's not
public
meant
web.
to be. Yeah, it wasn't meant to be. So when you wrap a privacy coin in a surveillance coin to make it easier or simpler or whatever, like for instance, Pirate has a wrapped Pirate. You're leaking a lot of metadata because you then are creating uh T, like transparent, to a Z, and then to get it unwrapped, you have to go from Z to T. So all of a sudden, all the amazing privacy that you had just using the privacy coin, now you're leaking that onto the surveillance coin Explorer because you know it's there. You're all of a sudden creating all this metadata. And so for instance, like if you're trying to push a huge amount of funds through a wrapped coin, someone looking at that wrapped coin Explorer would notice, oh, look, here at 10 a.m., 1,000 wrapped coins went in. And then here, an hour later, 1,000 wrapped coins came out. They can do what's called amount analysis and also timestamp analysis. And sometimes it's in the next block. Sometimes people don't realize how good this analysis is, and they don't even wait an hour or a day or a week. Because if you wait a long time, then it becomes less likely that that's definitely that amount. But if you literally put 1,000 coins in and then the next block 1,000 coins come out, it's like, oh, that's a really high probability that these things are the same. I'm going to
But
go ahead.
the exposure is only during the time while it's wrapped. But still,
Yeah, there's also a lot of
so what was the purpose of having a privacy coin anyway?
yeah, and also there's the centralization issue, which is who is running that wrapped gateway. The last time I checked, I'm not, I dislike wrapped anything in terms of wrapping privacy coins. But when Pirate makes something, I look into it. I want to see what they're doing, and I was like, okay, they're made as wrapped, all Pirate. What are they doing? And basically, they have one single server run by one single Pirate person that wraps and unwraps these tokens. Well, what happens if that one server gets hacked? What happens if that one server becomes malicious? What happens if that one server is honest, but they are become, highly surveilled, and then someone is just looking at all the data coming in and out of that one server? You're losing a lot of privacy by all the data going through a single server.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's multiple reasons why the wrapped coins are not a great idea. I understand why people want them. It's basically pure like ease of use and liquidity. They want to be able to use privacy coins like surveillance coins, but it kind of defeats a lot of the purpose of privacy coins to use
Well,
them.
we get into Anon sets. I know one of your guys, one of your developers on Rio has something called Hushland, where he's got this, in
Yes.
real time Anon set feature in there, and it actually shows the Anon set of other coins as well.
Yeah,
So
I don't know
you guys
yeah.
have the highest. You're like somewhere in the 60,000 range as far as the anonymity set.
Oh no, we're close to 900,000 now.
Oh, well, okay.
It's okay. I forgive you. I forgive you for not knowing the latest.
Yeah, I don't. It's been a while since I looked at it, but
it's the URL for listeners: explorer.hush.land. That is one of our explorers, and it shows the Anon set. I think it's the second number it shows right under the block height. So
yeah.
First
So
of all,
but you're achieving this by only having one pool, and some of the other coins have multiple pools, which that's what dilutes their Anon set.
That's one of many reasons.
Dangerous? Is it good or bad to only have one pool?
It's the best to have only one pool. I can say that full stop. The best thing is to have one pool. It's almost like in a castle, only having one gate
that you have to defend. You know, if you had 10 gates in your castle wall, well, then you're going to go defend 10 friggin' gates, and only one has to go down for the invaders to come in, right? But if
Yeah,
you
I mean, I
only
don't understand this stuff. I don't understand all of that. I'm not a coder. I'm not a developer. So, you know, my initial thought is, oh, well, it's like a honeypot. It's all in one place. But
Okay, no, I
I
think that that's reasonable. I want people to have at least an intuitive understanding of what. So it's an anonymity set, also known as a privacy pool or shielded pool. There's a lot of different terminology for it, but it's the set of possible coins that could be involved in a transaction. It's as simple as that. So when you make a ZK coin transaction, there's a set of possible coins that could be involved. And for ZK coins, it's very large. It's basically all the coins that are in that pool of privacy coins. It's like it's very big. It's like global in the sense that it's all the history of privacy transactions. Any of those addresses could be involved. Whereas with Cryptonote coins like Monero, it's using 11 mix-ins, they call them. So the address involved in any transaction can be any one of the 11 kind of mix-ins or decoys that they
the ring ceremony.
the ring, yeah, the ring signature stuff. So it's kind of like with Cryptonote coins, the anonymity set is per transaction. There's only a small group, and now some Cryptonote coins increased it a lot. So for instance, some coins it's like over 100, right? So they're better than 11, but it's not very good either still. Like if you're the NSA or some big billion-dollar company crunching the numbers on 100 versus 11, it's not that much harder. It is a little bit harder, but then you go to zero knowledge coins, it's not just per transaction. It's all the addresses that were ever making privacy transactions. So it increases over time. Like every transaction that has privacy stuff on Hush, it increases by on average, it increases the anonymity set. With Monero, here's an example I like to give. Let's say you made a Monero transaction a year ago and you had 11 people, 11 addresses in that transaction that were kind of giving you the Where's Waldo privacy. That's what I like to call it. Like with Cryptonote and Monero, you're using Where's Waldo privacy. You're hiding in a big group of people, and big could be as small as 11. And, no one knows where to find you. But now let's say that some of those people had their wallets seized by the authorities or whatever, right? Let's say just one, of those people had their wallets seized. Well, immediately what they do is they go to a company like Chainalysis or CipherTrace or one of these other analysis companies, and they upload that data to their database. And now the anonymity set for that transaction is smaller. Okay, it's smaller by one. And now let's say another wallet gets seized, and then another, or a server gets hacked, and a whole bunch of wallets get seized and whatever, and that all gets uploaded. This is happening. Like we've found videos of Chainalysis and other companies saying, if you have wallets that you have from privacy coins, give them to us. We'll upload the data and we'll run our analysis and we can see what we can see. So these companies are worth billions of dollars. The financial incentive for them to do this is insanely large. They're definitely doing it in their own words. Nobody knows like how good they are or how well it works, because that's highly kept secret. But the math your anonymity goes down over time because of other people's actions on the Monero chain, for instance. With Hush, every time you make a private transaction, it's the whole history of all people that have ever used privacy that you're hiding in, and that's close to 1 million right now for every transaction. So it's just better. I mean, it's just better, and you don't have to understand all the crazy math to know that that's better. So now here's the difference with Hush and Pirate. Pirate has two anonymity sets. They have an old one and then a new one. So they are hurt a little bit because anyone that's analyzing this stuff, let's say an analysis company, they can tell who's in the old anonymity set and who's in the new one. It splits the set. So instead of having one big set to hide in, you're now hiding in a smaller set. That's really all it comes down to.
And so, and you guys are going to stick with, is it sapling or orchard or what?
Yeah, sapling. Yeah. So Hush only has one set, and that's on purpose because we know that hiding in the biggest set is the best, right? So now here's an example for Zcash. I think they've got like 4 sets now or something, right? So
the latest is the unified addresses. And what do you think of the unified addresses? Is that a good idea, bad idea?
Unified addresses are weird. They're not actually their own set. They're like a Frankenstein thing that I don't. Unified address lets you, it's like a bucket that you can give to someone that has multiple addresses in it, and then the person like reading the address, let's say a QR code, they can decide which address in that bucket to use. It has all kinds of bad privacy implications, but there is the Sprout Anon set, there's the sapling, there's Orchard, and then I think that when they launch their Halo 2 thing, if they ever launch this new Halo 2 thing, Zcash, that'll be their 4th. Unified addresses like leaks data in between all of those 4. But if you can imagine, every time you create a new anonymity set, it starts from 0. It's like, where's Waldo hiding by himself in a big stadium with no one else? And you have to wait.
If Halo proves to be, useful, will Hush be switching to Halo, or are you just gonna hold steady with sapling?
I would say that, first of all, Halo provides no privacy improvements. It's purely about, this whole trusted ceremony and all that stuff. And it's really about supply. It's really about auditability of the supply. Halo 2 is all about saying, we're definitely sure no one is printing, free money in the background and no one else knows about it. That's really all it solves. It does not increase privacy for anyone. So yeah, Hush is very happy with the sapling Anon set that we have. Sapling was basically the second version of Zcash addresses that they came out with, and they were actually fast. The first version, Sprout, were painfully slow, and they found a horrible bug that allowed people to, if they wanted, create infinite free money inside of Z addresses, and they wouldn't be able to tell. They're like, what's called an inflation bug. So
you had some of that. You had some of those documents in Attacking Zcash, or what?
Yeah, there's a website called attackingzcash.com where I wrote a white paper that it talks about some other ways of attacking Zcash, but it also mentions the Sprout inflation bug in there. And just to, it's a good time to mention, Hush, now we migrated away from the Zcash 1.0 code base, and because I had so many commits in Komodo, the latest mainnet blockchain of Hush, we use the Komodo source code. And that was because I had put so many thousands of lines in Komodo that I wanted to use my own work. So
so you're not in danger of Komodo coming back on you with the DMCA, or no?
No, because anybody can take open source code, specifically MIT, and change it to GPL. That's completely legal. It's part of the license that you can do anything you want. The MIT license basically says, don't sue me, do whatever you want with this. That's basically the TLDR of it. GPL says, you can do whatever you want, but you can't change the license. This license has to stay if you release new derived versions of this code. So
you mentioned earlier about the NSA running their own version of it and everything, and if we look at what is it, Proton Mail and Telegram and everybody's compromised at this point, all of them. And like, it seems to me like the only thing out there that we can use for private messaging is it's kind of this, crypto in the message field.
I mean, yeah, at least you're not trusting a single company that's bound by the laws of a single country. I mean, decentralized blockchains kind of get away from that. They're not perfect, like by any means. I don't like to say anything's perfect, but with Hush, I really like Signal, the protocol. So Signal, the chat program, the protocol they use is awesome and amazing. They like really push the envelope forward. They invented new stuff, but they require phone numbers, and they're based in the US, and they're centralized. You can't run your own server, and they have a lot of kind of problems like that. So Hush has something called Hush Chat, and it's basically, if I was doing the elevator pitch, it's Signal on a blockchain, Signal on a privacy blockchain. So instead of phone numbers, we use Z addresses. And instead of having centralized servers, every full node, can interact and do whatever they want. And there's no company controlling it, and there's no country that's controlling that company. So it's not
pretty
perfect.
much all of the ZK coins have this option, right? The message field.
Every coin derived, excuse me, from Zcash has this thing called the encrypted memo field, and you can think of it as encrypted data that gets added to every transaction. It's optional. You don't have to use it, but it's always there. And what's cool about it is that it's always there, and you can't tell if someone is using or not. That's really important because, for instance, with Monero or Cryptonote coins, if you wanted to do something like this, then people would be able to see, oh, this transaction, it has encrypted data because it's bigger or it's small, but this one doesn't because it's smaller. And it's hard. You can't add it after the fact. You have to launch the coin with this feature, and then every transaction forever has this data, and it's just empty if you're not using it, but you can't tell if it's being used from the outside. So everyone has that. All the ZK coins have that. Hush Chat is built on top of that, and adds another layer of encryption. So it has multiple layers of encryption and allows more of a conversational back and forth via that memo field, because by default it's more of a one-way.
What's the capacity of that memo field?
Because we have another layer of encryption, it's instead of, okay, so it starts off being 512 bytes, which is half a kilobyte. For reference, that's like bigger than a normal SMS message. That's like, I think, roughly 3 or 4 SMS messages. But because we add another layer of encryption, it gets reduced to 235 bytes, which is still more than a regular SMS. And we do have the option of like chaining them together. So in theory, in reality, we can make it bigger. Pretty much we could make it much bigger, up to about 200 kilobytes is that's the maximum size of one transaction on Hush. So I would say right now, each Hush Chat by default 235 bytes, which is roughly 2, maybe 1.5 SMS messages. And then it's pretty easy to increase that to 200 by chaining them together. You could even maybe chain multiple transactions together to get a bigger one, but we don't, Hush Chat isn't for like storing DVDs and MP3s and stuff. Like the blockchains are not for storing huge amounts of data. They're for storing small amounts of very important data. And then
you can put links or whatever
in
in
there.
there.
You can put like a BitTorrent URL or a download link, or that's where it really shines. Like
Factom does some stuff like that for they storing data on the blockchain, and they're using Merkle trees and blah blah. I don't understand all that crap. So
but here's another reason why Hush smart chains are so important is that, let's say Alice and Bob want to talk and they're going to use Hush Chat on the public Hush mainnet. That's good because they can find each other easily. Hush mainnet is like a global thing. Anyone can kind of find it, get involved easily. But then let's say they're like, oh, we want to have even more privacy. We want to now switch to our own Hush smart chain and use Hush Chat on our own Hush smart chain. And then, so in the memo, in the Hush Chat encrypted chat of the main, on Hush mainnet, they then give each other the information of how to connect to their personal Hush smart chain that only they know about, and no other public people would know about it. And that means that even their encrypted data is not on the mainnet. because even some people are like, hey, I don't even want my encrypted data on this public mainnet. That's reasonable. That's okay. There's use cases for everything, and so that's why Hush smart chains are really cool, because you can actually kind of think of them as single use blockchains to chat about a certain topic and then throw them away, and then that's it. And so let maybe Alice and Bob talk on a certain Hush smart chain for a week, and then they say, you know what, let's switch to a different one now. Let's throw that away, delete it. No one can fucking connect to it. No one knows about it. Now let's make a new one, use that. That's a very high level of privacy. That means that even if your Hush mainnet becomes totally hacked and backdoor, that you still don't know what that side chain's Hush smart chain was doing. So it's all about having layers of privacy and security. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. So
I guess I think just for the final question, I would ask, like you have forced Z to Z. Everything is a forced Z to Z transaction. And what about your connections? Are they Tor nodes, or I mean, what is the level of security in that regard for Hush?
Okay, so this is where the encrypted network comes in. So by default, Satoshi wrote Bitcoin such that everything is plain text. Everything is on the wire. Anybody can see. What does that mean? Well, it means that, for instance, your ISP, if your ISP is like surveilling you, the second you make a Bitcoin transaction, your ISP knows that this address belongs to this blockchain address belongs to this IP address. That's called linkability. They're linking together that metadata. That's really bad. Okay, that's not good. Okay, so now for privacy coins, all privacy coins inherited that, and very few. I think there's only a very few privacy coins that decided that was a bad idea. I think I don't know how to pronounce it. DERO, Dero. I think that is one coin that was the first in the Cryptonote world to encrypt the network layer. Hush, as far as I know, in the ZK world, Hush was the first to make it mandatory that we encrypt all of our network layer stuff. So what that means is that if your ISP is surveilling you, which you should just assume they are, right? I mean, if they're not, they could very well do it tomorrow because someone forces them to. You should just always assume your ISP is surveilling you. And what that means is they just see a bunch of encrypted gobbledygook. They know your IP address already. They're giving you the IP address. They're the ISP, right? But they don't know all the blockchain data to tie to that. So Hush is the first ZK coin to make every single full node require that encryption on the network layer, like basically the HTTPS, the little green lock in your browser or whatever. So that is very good. That makes it much harder for all these ISPs. And there's not just one ISP. When you go to a website, there's probably like 10 ISPs between you and that website. There's your local ISP that gives you your internet to your house. Then there's the ISP's ISP. Then the next layer up. And there's a lot. So any one of those ISPs in the middle can get that data. So breaking that linkability of that data is really important. And Hush was the first ZK coin to do that. So that really helps. You can use things like Tor and I2P and other stuff. Those are not default. And they also they have their own problems. A lot of people just think like just use Tor and then it's solved, but using Tor opens you up to new attacks. So for instance, a lot of Tor exit nodes are malicious. A lot of Tor exit nodes are run by the surveillance companies, and they're trying to see who will use their exit nodes. It's somewhat random. The code decides randomly where to exit, and then they're surveilling that, and there's new attacks that are possible because you're using Tor. So just use Tor is kind of a meme, but it's not perfect. You kind of still need to be an expert to use Tor effectively. So you can use Tor and I2P, but they're not default with Hush.
I guess I lied then about the last question. What is Seach? What is Seach?
Okay, Seach is actually the reason. Seach, I would say, is the main reason why our anonymity set is so large. Okay, there's a lot of reasons that add up to why our non set is so large. One of them is we only have one. Okay, we're not splitting any of our stuff into multiple sets, but Seach is what makes it so that you can't tell how many people are involved in the transaction. So here's a very concrete example. Let's say you're using Pirate or Zcash or any other ZK coin. Let's say you want to talk to your 3 secret friends every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Well, that really stands out on a blockchain explorer. Having those 3 outputs is not the default. It's not common. It's actually very uncommon. And so a blockchain analysis company who have, mega servers that just crunch this data all the time, they can notice that pattern. They can say, oh, check this out. Every Tuesday at 3 p.m., there's this special transaction and 3 people are receiving data right there. Okay. With Hush, we obfuscate how many people are getting the transaction. So it basically rounds up to about 8. So for instance, if I'm talking to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 people, it all looks the same. It all looks the same. So that I call that the talking to 3 friends meta leak or problem.
And,
So
you mentioned adding features from Monero. Is this where this
yeah,
idea comes from?
yeah.
So you're basically stacking Cryptonote on top of zero knowledge.
Yes, in a metaphorical way, yes. I just, some people, the nerdy, detailed people will say, oh, they're not using the code. We're not using any code directly from Cryptonote, and we're really not even using the math and writing our own code. It's really the idea. We're adding in the hiding in a set of other things on top of the zero knowledge. Because here's the thing. Zero knowledge is like it's only the zero knowledge proof stuff is only like at the very internals at a certain layer. But like for instance, zero knowledge doesn't say anything about leaking IP addresses, right? It doesn't say anything about leaking how many people you're sending in one transaction. It's somewhat limited. The zero knowledge is really like all about the addresses and the amounts. So we're taking a good idea from Monero, and when they use 11 mix-ins or whatever to mix in, you can't tell exactly how many people are being sent to. You could send to a few people and it looks the same as just sending to one. So yeah, and why that increases our non-set is because it increases it because there's multiple outputs all the time. Instead of the default transaction only having 1 or 2 private outputs, our default transactions have 8. And so our non-set grows much faster than any other coin. That's definitely true. So there's all these other reasons too. So, but those are the main reasons. Seach makes our non-set grow very fast, in terms of velocity. And then we only have one. We're not splitting it across multiple. And then we also have kind of a form of Seach for when you mine coins. When you have newly mined Coinbase coins, you need to send them to a Z-adder, and we basically have Seach for that as well. So people can't tell which output are the coins. They kind of hide a bit as well. And attacking Zcash.com talks a little bit more about that stuff. There's lots of like theoretical attacks too. Like some attacks, like we don't know how efficient they are, how realistic they are, but they seem like they could be possible, right? Well, why not protect against theoretical attacks? Because you can't go back in time and change blockchain data. Like once blockchain data is there, it's somewhat immutable. So it's better to have a large buffer of safety, So Hush believes in that. Like have a large buffer of safety, because we don't know how fast quantum computers are going to be in 10 years or whatever, or new attacks. So we can't go back in time and change blockchain data. So we might as well, have a few layers of safety, and that's kind of ties into that.
Awesome. Well, I think that pretty much wraps that up. Let's talk about the community. It's Hush.is is the website. What about the Telegram or any other social media where people can go to join the
So
conversation?
so Hush.is, you can also, I like saying is, like Hush.is / privacy. If someone just wants to like read a little bit of what is Hush.is / privacy. I kind of like that URL because it's Hush is privacy. If you go to Hush.is / TG, that'll send you to our Telegram. And then we don't use Twitter anymore because Twitter is a kind of a censorship platform. We do have like Mastodon and some other things, but Telegram is the main place where we talk about stuff. We know that Telegram isn't perfect. That
Yeah.
is where we do like user support. So like if you have questions like how do I run a full node, my wallet's not working, all that. We do that on Telegram. And
And then
yeah,
Onryo has his own site called Hush.land, and
Hush.land. Yeah, it's run by the developer.
I've seen his verbiage and stuff criticized, but he's not a native English speaker, so I guess you got to cut him some slack on that.
Yes, he's part of the core team. He runs Hush.land. He runs an Explorer. But yes, he is not a native English speaker. So obviously, I mean, I don't speak any other languages very well. So he speaks it pretty good. I would give him credit. But yeah, so there's a lot of info about Hush online. Some of it is hard to find, but we have like a bot in our Telegram that helps people. So if you come to Telegram, we have a bot that they'll help answer questions, give people links, do stuff like that. And yeah, obviously Telegram is not perfect, but we just use it as a social media platform to take questions and as a starting off point, I guess, because obviously some people will be like, "Oh, Telegram, that's not good for X, Y, and Z reasons." Nothing's perfect, but we do need some way to interact with users and take questions and all that stuff. So,
Well, in closing, I'll go ahead and throw my pitch out there again. Anarchapulco, February 14th to the 18th. The first 4 days is like medical and all the other different, libertarian related ideas. And the last day is crypto day. So of course we're closing it out with the best. And we've got Paul Pui speaking. We've got Lutz from Piratechain, who's also speaking. So if you want to hear him, I like hearing stuff from everybody. So, and then one of my friends, Colin Cantrell of Nexus.io, that guy is just crazy, insanely smart. You'll love to, hear this guy talk. And just some great ones. Josh from Voltoro. I'm hoping to have Ladar Levison. I'll know later today for sure if we're getting Ladar Levison, and he's going to hold a workshop and show you how to de-Google your phones. So there's some really great stuff there. And maybe we'll probably even talk a little bit about NFTs and the rest of that stuff. But save some money, go to anarchapulco.com and use the code CRYPTO10, CRYPTO10 to catch that. Thanks a lot, Duke.
very cool. Thank you for having me on and asking a lot of very good questions. I think they'll be very useful for people.